Yes.
I think we need to take a minute to celebrate Randy
I think we should. She's sitting right here.
publicly. Oh, she is?
Yeah.
No, I don't want to talk to her. I just want to celebrate
No, I
her.
know, but you want to
Okay,
talk
thank you.
about her while she's here?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
I just want to make it uncomfortable for you to be in the room with her while we are speaking highly of her work and her dedication. But she can actually hear it. That's
no,
fun, right? Is that uncomfortable for you?
No, she can't hear it.
I know, that's perfect. Right.
No, it
Okay.
doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. It doesn't even make her uncomfortable. She's so used to it.
How can we make you and her uncomfortable right now? No, but I think we need to truly above and beyond. I would describe her as intern to the stars, but that would make us the stars, and that's just that's not what we're about here. I mean, okay, we're a little bit about that.
We're like little stars.
Yeah, are we?
Little baby stars.
We're
like the stars you can buy, like the stars that you can have a star named after you. We're
right.
Like those
yes.
Stars.
Yeah. Yeah. You need a really big telescope to see us.
Right.
We're very far away.
But we're there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. In the cavalcade of stars. That is.
Right.
We're the kind.
Grow? Like, can we get bigger?
I don't know. I think we're just the kind that flame out and then nobody knows about it for 7 years. No?
Wow.
Please, that gives us 5.5 years to really start killing it with this thing.
No.
Okay. So
we are not the 7-year itch of podcasts.
Another ad campaign. You and I both standing on subway grates.
Yes.
Write it down. Write it down.
I'd totally do it. I already have the dress.
I have to get the dress, but that's not what's important. But I think we really need to. It is a difficult time for everybody.
Yes.
Nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows what the new normal is.
Correct.
But for our intern, Randy, that new normal is, damn it, I'm going to find you a puppeteer.
Correct.
And I think that needs to be acknowledged. I think
agree.
That needs to be celebrated.
I agree.
And I think we should, I think we should do something nice for her. But only after we get all of the gifts that are in our contract riders and we are required per our agreement to get.
Right.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to get our beaks wet on this deal.
Well, no, of course.
No, someone's got to get a taste.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's fair.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
It's a weird time of year. Like it's all very odd.
It is.
And I think one thing that is sort of this return to normalcy for some people is the fact that baseball is coming back.
Yeah.
So
very, very late. Like, it's weird that it's coming back when it's coming back.
It is. I don't know if it's going to be interesting to watch, but I think, people want that feeling that, that sense of somewhere out there, there's a green field, there's a diamond. Why are you laughing?
Because somewhere out there, there's a really hot catcher.
You're ruining it. You're ruining it.
Quads, working on those hammies.
This is America's pastime. You're desecrating it.
I'm sorry. I'm appreciating it. I'm appreciating the athletes in the sport.
In the.
I like the rest of the players too. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Sure. No, but it's sort of like it feels. I don't know. The fact that everything is so crazy right now, I don't know how it feels about baseball with everything. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, but I do feel baseball's America's pastime, and it is like very, I don't know, but I kind of feel like you got to be in the stands and you got to.
Right. You need your peanuts and Cracker Jack.
Right.
And you do not need to care whether you will return.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, you probably should care a little bit.
Yeah.
At least write down where you parked.
Yeah. You know what I never knew till like 2
Oh,
years
this would be
ago?
rich. What? What did you not know
I
until 2 years
never
ago?
and maybe it was like 4 years ago. I didn't know that the 7th inning stretch was a literal we get up and stretch in the 7th inning.
Is this because you grew up in England?
No, but I thought I told you I've got baseball players in my family. No, I thought that the 7th inning stretch
No,
was
you had
like
baseball players throw things at your family.
no, I had baseball players in my family. My grandpa was called up to the Red Sox.
Right, but then
He
a
played for Cocoa Beach. Like it's not like he'd never played before.
oh, okay. Whoa.
But
Don't get your catcher's gear in a bunch. Let's
I
just
know.
cool.
I wish you had a catcher's mitt on right now. Just snap it. No,
Um,
I thought that it was like I thought the 7th inning stretch was like in horse racing, like the home stretch, or like it's the home stretch of the game, or I thought
but
it was like you're towards the end. I didn't realize it was get up and, you know,
actually physically stretch.
actually
And
physically stretch.
but did you realize that the home stretch in horse racing is the last whatever number of feet it is when you
Yeah,
round the final post? Oh, so that you do
right.
know.
Yeah, and I thought
Okay.
that's what they meant, like because you
Do
should
you know
only
that
have
because that is a sport that requires you to dress up fancy and
Mhm.
drink special drinks?
I went to Royal Ascot when I was a kid.
Of course you did.
No,
Did you get to pet the winning horse?
no,
Okay.
I
Were you
wasn't.
betting at the time? Yeah, of
I
course.
bet at when I went to Henley Royal Regatta, which is the rowing, like
Of
it's this
course.
right.
Sure. Right. Yes.
My dad and his friend were betting, but I got to keep all the winnings, so it was great.
Oh, that's excellent.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, no, I love this idea that we are having. I'm going to be laying, by the way. I guess I should have said this at the beginning. I'm going to be laying baseball sounds all over this.
That's
So
fine.
while we're talking, you hear people playing catch and the organ going in the background. And so while people are participating in America's favorite pastime, you were talking about ponies and the Royal Regatta.
Uh huh.
Can we get cricket in too? Can we just get the trifecta of Englishness?
Oh yeah, I could tell you all
Okay.
about cricket.
So she goes to me, she goes, why don't you go down to the ag campus and see if they have something for groundskeeping? And I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, they don't have classes for mowing grass. And she goes, just go down and check. And so I did. And sure enough, I meet up with a person by the name of Dr. Love, which he wasn't a James Bond villain, but he had a great name for that. And and that the
Of
rest
course,
was
yeah.
history. He ran the turf program at the University of Wisconsin Madison, and I had already done a lot of my basic stuff was out of the way, so I only had about 2 years left of getting all the specialized stuff for turf, and got through that. And within right after graduation, within a year, I was working for the Orioles. When you sit up in the stands and you watch a grounds crew pull a tarp at a major league or minor league game, we make it look way easier than it really is. Those the tarps that we use. Well, of course, nowadays they're using more, but back when I was in it, our tarps weighed on an average of a ton, and that was if it was clean and dry, and most of the times it wasn't. It was dirty and wet, which makes things worse. And I mean, to show you how dangerous it was, in when I was in my early years, when I was first with the Orioles, this is about I want to say about 4 years into it. We had a young man, he's about 16 years old, very athletic, and we were in the middle of a ball game and had a rain delay. The rain had come, we had the rain delay,
Yep.
and we come back out to pull the tarp off, and we line up on the tarp, and I'm on the side uh, of opposite of everybody else that's pulling. Everybody's on one side, and I'm actually on the side 90 degrees to that side. And the guy who has the problem is right on the corner behind me. So we start pulling the tarp back, and I'm pulling, and it's full of water, so it's really a tough pull. We get about halfway out, all of a sudden I feel behind me the tarp start going slack, and I turn around and I look behind me, and here he is going to the ground, clutching his heart. The kid, 16-year-old kid's having a heart attack on the field in front of all the fans and the ball players. And
Wow.
we at this point in time, I was still the assistant head groundskeeper. The head groundskeeper at the time, Pat Sanderone, he rushed back there. He was a former Marine and or a Navy person, and and knew CPR. And one of the young inner city kids who was on the tarp crew had just learned CPR because of his child. So Pat and that other guy went to work on John on the ground crew who had gone down, and I ran in to get the help from the ambulance people.
Wow.
And we lost him twice on the field. We revived him and lost him twice, and finally the third time we got him stable,
Oh my
and
God.
Oh.
and they pulled him off. And it turns out that the kid had a previously undiagnosed heart murmur. And
Wow.
the next day he got a pacemaker put in him, and that was pretty much the end of his career on the tarp crew. So
Wow.
it just
Oh
goes
my
to show
God.
you, how the amount of strain that goes in doing something like that. We make it look really easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you would never.
Did the
I-
Orioles win?
I don't remember.
Okay, sorry.
Terrible.
I'm
But
sorry.
it was pretty cool because the entire Mariner team, if I recall, went the next day to go see him in the hospital,
Yes. See,
which
that's
is
nice.
awesome.
which is pretty impressive. The opposing team going to see him at the hospital.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And it's impressive that he made it and everybody jumped in and helped. I mean, it's actually I
It wasn't a pretty sight on the field at the time. I mean,
no.
the stadium was just, you could hear a pin drop in the stadium. Everybody was just couldn't believe what was happening.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh,
But in many ways, it was the most fortunate place to have something like that when you have
Absolutely.
so
You
many
got,
trainers
it's
and
well,
medical
true.
and there's so
professionals
many
there.
doctors in the audience, and
Right.
yeah, exactly. We had plenty of help once things got going.
Yeah. Wow.
Man.
Oh,
Anyway, so that's that's a normal day on the, on the
oh my
ground
Right.
crew.
gosh.
Yeah.
The
Right?
more the technical work goes on when the ball club's out of town, and that's when we get into the really nitty gritty of maintaining the field. And the one thing I loved about when we moved from Memorial Stadium to Oriole Park was Memorial Stadium was very enclosed, and as a fan, you couldn't look in on the field. And nowadays, when they built new ballparks, starting with Oriole Park, we made it more uh, accessible so people could see all day long what was going on in the park. And so
Mhm.
at Oriole Park, you can walk along that Utah Street walkway between the warehouse and the ballpark, and you can look down any time of the day and see what the ground crew is doing on the field. Now, that has its good points and bad points. We can't do anything as sneaky as easily as we used to
Right.
because we do
Yeah.
those things once in a while. But
What? Never.
but 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 as a kid, I would have killed to be able to go up and watch a ground crew working on a ball field anytime.
Mhm.
As an
Yeah.
adult, it is so mesmerizing. Like as a spectator, it's just hypnotizing to watch the crew work. It's awesome.
I often describe in '96, Harry Smith with CBS This Morning came and did a piece on me called "Hey Harry, Do My Job," and I described to him, what a groundskeeper really is they're an artist. We come out in the morning, we see what the ball field looks like. It's been messed up from the day before or whatever, and we clean that entire field back up. We repaint the picture so that it's there for the next day because there's something about the geometry of not just a baseball field, but any sports field. There's straight lines, there's squares, there's grid patterns, there's all kinds of things. And there's something in the human brain that is attracted to all these geometric shapes and sizes
Mhm.
out there and colors that really, get people excited. And, if I had a dime for every time somebody came up to me at the ballpark and said, "Hey, I think I know how you put those grass patterns in the grass," and they'll have another different cockamamie idea on how it's
Like
done.
nope. So I mean, obviously you actually do have to channel your love of meteorology, I'd imagine too,
Yep,
because you have to be aware of what's happening with the weather and
you had the
how
best of
far in
both worlds. the
Right.
best of both worlds. Now, I didn't have all the cool tools that they got today with radar
Mhm.
on your cell phone and stuff like that. I would have killed for that. But that's what happens when you get old. Life goes on, and they get the better tools, the younger generation.
So
Always.
how did you keep track of that stuff? How did you
Well,
just I mean,
yeah, in the early
it seems
days,
like
in the 80s, before the internet, um,
right.
you called the weather service and said, "Hey, what's it going to do?" And then you relied on what they told you. Now, we had one situation. This is as Pat was getting close to retiring, and so he would leave the ball game in like the seventh or eighth inning. And usually when he'd leave, he'd tell me, "Hey, Paul, put the tarp on." And this particular night, he decided not to, like for some reason or another. We were in the middle of a drought. I think this was '89. We were in the middle of a wicked, wicked drought in the East Coast. And so we would do anything for a drop of water on the field, aside from the normal irrigation. There's just a big difference between natural rain and irrigation on a ball field. And so we were in the middle of a homestand, and Pat left, and I said, "Oh, geez, he didn't tell me whether he wanted to cover or not." So I called the weather service, and they said, "Well, I don't expect we'll get anything, but if we do, we might get a couple of sprinkles." And I thought, "Okay, well, we can handle a couple of sprinkles." And so I told the tarp crew, I said, "You don't have to stick around to cover up. We'll take care of the field and get it ready to go, and we'll see you tomorrow night for tonight's game." So the tarp crew leaves. We put the field to bed. I leave. I'm driving home. I get to my house, and just as I'm getting out of my vehicle, it starts to sprinkle. I go, "Oh, this must be one of those sprinkles." And I, walk in the house, and I start undressing, getting ready for bed, and I'm listening to the rain start to pick up on the roof, and I'm going, "This is a pretty good sprinkle." And I'm laying there in bed, and as I'm laying there in bed, it just starts raining harder and harder and harder, and it poured. Not rained, it poured all night long, nonstop. Well, remember, I'm only the assistant at this point in time. So I'm
Right.
getting sick to my stomach. I physically made myself sick. I'm having a panic attack
Oh,
in the middle of the night. I'm on the toilet. I got all the problems going on that go with, being fearful of your job.
right.
you know,
Right.
you don't know whether to jump out the window or whatever. And so 5 o'clock rolls around the next morning. It's still pouring outside. And I call up the weather service for the new forecast because I know the new forecast comes in around then. And I talk to them. I go, "Well, it looks like we're going to have rain till noon, and then the sun's going to come out." I'm going, "Holy crap.
Oh,
I got a
Thanks.
night game
Yeah.
tonight, and I'm never going to get that field ready." This was back before the modern day sand based fields that drained, incredibly well. These were old native soil fields that they just didn't drain for nothing.
Mhm.
So I call up. Fortunately, it was during the summer when there's no the kids aren't in school because our tarp crew is made up of high school kids. And so I started calling up the kids. "Hey, get down to the ballpark as soon as you can this morning." So I get in there at 7. It's still raining at the time. The dugouts are flooded up to the top step on both sides, and the field there it is wide open, just pouring rain. And I get in there, and I start calling for all of our suppliers around the city of Baltimore for any drying agent they got laying around. I need it down at the ballpark.
mm,
So luckily, the rain stopped about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. It didn't last till noon, and we started working on the field and pumping out the dugouts and everything. And then Pat Sanderon comes waltzing at about 9:30. And Pat used to tell me all these stories of his heyday way back in the 50s and the 60s, early 60s of having to pour gasoline on the field and light it on fire to dry the field out. But for some reason that morning, not one of those stories stuck in his head because he never made that mistake in his life.
of course.
Of
and
course, yeah.
Never.
and he
No.
he reamed me a new one.
Oh,
And so we kept working on drying the field. I had to cancel batting practice for the game, and we just got the field dry enough for the game time. And I was just scared to death that night. And keep in mind we got Cal Ripken out on our infield, so because Cal plays for the Orioles.
right.
And You would believe, but at the end of the game, Cal comes up to me after the game and goes, "That's the best damn infield that's ever been."
Planned it.
Because it had so much good moisture in it. He loved
Yeah.
he loved it.
Right.
So how often did you get feedback directly on all of the work you and your team did and how it related to the results of the game? I mean, I know we jokingly talked about how you guys could get, blamed for everything, just like I get blamed for everything. But how often did you really get acknowledged, good or bad, for your impact on the game?
Well, most of the time, you never heard much from the players unless they wanted to complain. There was very few players over the course of my career that would go out of the way to tell you, "Hey, this field is great" and stuff like that. They just assume that you might know that, but they always love to, if they made an error, there were several players that would always blame it on the groundskeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just part of the game. And one of the toughest lessons I learned, because I started in there very young. I was 25 when I started that job, and the toughest lesson I learned in Major League Baseball is you can't make everybody happy. You got 25 guys out there. Everybody's got a different opinion on how that field should be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And it was a very hard lesson for me to learn. It took me about 5 or 6 years to really, not take it so hard every time I got a complaint, because it's just the way it was. The front office rarely ever gave me any trouble about the field. Ownership was a little bit different story. I had some run-ins with the ownership in the later years at Oriole Park with infield color and things like that. But for the most part, it wasn't. It really wasn't that big of a problem. The grounds crew's job is to present as safe a field as you can provide the players, and you try to make it safe and even for both sides. Because even if in the old days you say, well, we're going to do this to the ball field and this, you might have given that in a slight advantage to your team, but in a lot of cases your team yourself was battling that same issue, whatever you did to stop the other team from doing something. So you don't see that much anymore in Major League Baseball of trying to do those kind of things to other teams.
How involved was MLB on a sort of regular basis checking the condition of the field? Did they just trust that every team, like you said, want what's best for their team, so they're going to put out the best product? Yeah. Or, at that point you have the Expos, and they were still on the AstroTurf at that time. So,
yeah, well, when I started in Major League Baseball in '85, half the teams were artificial turf. And keep in mind that we got into the '90s was a major building boom for ball stadiums. We got away from the multiple use stadiums of Three Rivers Stadium and Riverfront Stadium and all these cookie cutter stadiums that were artificial turf so that they could play both football and baseball on them. So in the building boom of the '90s of Major League Baseball fields, a lot of baseball only fields, but then we got back to going into natural turf. Now we're just starting to see things go backwards again. I think this season that we haven't started yet, you were going to see 3 new artificial turf fields. We got it down to as low as 2 for a long time. Tampa and what's the Canadian? Toronto.
Jays, yeah.
Those 2 artificial turf. Now we're starting to see 3 more come online this year, and I believe there's 3 more coming online for next year. In the old days, they really didn't come around to check. We got checked once a year by a guy who formerly worked for GE, and he was hired by Major League Baseball to go around the ballparks and check the lighting levels of the field. And then while he was there, they'd have him check the mound height, check the bases, the distance of the base and stuff. And the big thing was having him check the mound. And there were several times it was easy for me to pull the wool over his eyes that our mound might not be legal. But so it was pretty loosey-goosey back then. Baseball, when I got into baseball in '85, it was still a game. But by 1990, it had become a business. Yeah. In that short 5 years, the first 5 years, and I saw a huge change in how baseball changed. And now it's they have their fingers in everything. For instance, back in my time, we could call a game. We didn't have to call Major League Baseball to tell them every little thing we're thinking about calling a game. And there were many times where what I might advise the club was pretty much what they would do. Now you can't make a move without Major League Baseball being totally involved in it when it comes to any kind of a rain out, not a rain delay, but a rain out.
Mhm.
So, but there are lots of other things that they've become very involved in, from the grounds operation and things like that. And some of it's for the good. Football, the NFL football is so much more ahead of their time in the care of the field, the integrity of the field, and protecting the players. And part of that's because their players association is very strong, and they're very adamant about the condition of those playing fields and the safety of those playing fields, with every right. I mean, it's a very physical sport. These guys don't play for too many seasons. It's got to be as safe as possible. Baseball,
Right.
in my opinion, is lagged behind on that. Players Association really hasn't shown much interest in that. But it's an opportunity where that could be taken care of, because you're seeing more and more non-baseball activities taking place in these ballparks, and sometimes they butt up very close to a homestand, to the point where it's a very tight time schedule for the groundskeepers to get the field ready to go in time, and that can create some pretty shaky situations. And I'd like to see the Players Association step up a little bit and take some interest like the NFL Players Association does, and
Yeah.
protect that field a little more.
And then, I mean, you in your story about first going to Wrigley is very much how I remember Fenway Park.
Yeah,
When you first walk, that smell of the grass, and I feel like that's any park you want to
yeah,
walk in, that combination of peanuts and lawn,
yeah,
and it always has that sense of like, this is a perfect field. This is if you're going to play baseball, you want to be here. This is the place. How much of that is true? Are you guys working right up till first pitch, frantically trying to get things ready, or is it kind of just maintaining at that point during the season once it starts?
Well, I can speak for us. We used to go in on a night game. A night game would be at the 7:30, I think it was. We started back then.
Mhm.
We would go in at 7 in the morning that morning and start our job. We worked basically about a 16-hour day, but we're not working all 16 hours. We're kind of like a fire department. We work about of that 16-hour days. We work half of that time. We're working about 8 hours, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
sitting around. You're kind of like the volunteer fire department. If any rain comes in, you're there. We're cheap rain insurance.
Right.
Um, or if there's other kinds of issues or problems with the field. Um, so we're not working the whole time, but you still have to be there the whole time, and that's a drag. When you're doing this, when you think about it, if you work a 7-day homestand that goes from Monday to Sunday, with Sunday being a day game typically, if we're working 16-hour days, we're putting in close to 105 hours in a week. Uh, and even if you're not physically working yourself every hour of that day, you still got to be there. You're in the heat, you're in the sun, you're in the
Mhm.
humidity. If you start doing a couple tarp pulls, that really takes it out of you. I mean, and commonly our guys are getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep at night, so you're really tapped in the summertime. I remember the first year I worked in Baltimore in '85. We had a stretch of 18 games in 22 days at home.
Ooh.
And I look back at that, and I cannot imagine how I got through that. A, because it was so long and so many hours, and
Right.
B, I was a Midwestern kid, not used to the heat and humidity of Baltimore. Baltimore is an oppressive place to live in the summertime. Very humid, not a lot of wind. I mean, it's just, you get up in the morning, as I always tell people, you come out of the shower, you start drying yourself off. You don't finish till you go to bed that night. You're constantly
Right.
drying yourself
Right.
off.
Yeah.
And that, and then being out and working in that intense sunlight, um, it just takes a toll on the body, and mentally you get so fatigued that your brain just kind of takes over, and it just goes into automatic mode, and you're not really thinking, you're just doing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's very taxing. And the ground crews of today have it harder than I had it, because they're being asked to do a lot more than they used to do, because along with all these games, they've got all these other extra activities, concerts and sleepovers and movie nights and all this kind of stuff to bring in more money into the ball club. And the ball club just keeps asking them for more and more, and not giving them any extra time off or any extra pay. It's a really sad statement on how the crews are being treated, in my opinion. I'm
Yeah.
really disappointed.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you'd come home after a stretch like that? Did you mow your own lawn? Did you take care of your landscaping? Were you like the shoemaker who's like, nope, I have no shoes. I'm not touching it.
I'm one of those weird guys who did do that. There were some times I had to have my wife at the time mow the lawn, but most of the time I tried to take care of it myself,
Oh,
and I kept a good lawn. Yeah, so
you have to. I
I
can
got
only
in
imagine.
somehow.
Oh, the
What's that?
neighbors would have been like one thing out of place. The neighbors would have been like, really?
Ooh, yeah.
Something must
There
be
goes,
wrong with him.
yeah, there goes the
Yeah.
He must not be
neighborhood,
feeling well.
right? What's that going to do to the season?
Right.
So now you work for a run groundskeeper you, and with Beacon Athletics, you're offering all these courses and
Awesome.
guides as to how to keep a good field and the
Mhm.
things you can do and the science behind it. I mean, it sounds like this is the kind of thing you would have killed for when you started, to have that inside info on it.
Well, and that's another big change. In the early '80s, when I started going into the turf program, there was no uh, turf program around the country that was exclusive to sports turf managers, because there were very few college trained college trained sports turf managers. There was a lot of college trained golf course superintendents. All the turf programs were geared towards golf back then, and so you had to take it and then just kind of manipulate it for baseball. But they don't teach anything about maintaining infield skins or infield soils. So when I went in, first of all, I was a rare bird, because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a major league groundskeeper.
Right.
And at that time, the Sports Turf Managers Association had just formed in 1982, and I came into that organization very early as a student, but they didn't have any educational materials out yet, because they had just formed. And so there really wasn't much, and I was always hungry for information. Nowadays, you've got the internet, Twitter. Every ground crew has a Twitter page. They show you what they're doing. As a kid, I would have loved that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's all these ways of getting all this information. Groundskeeper U that we have at Beacon Athletics is just another way of doing it, and it extended from when I first came to Beacon in 2000 when I left the Orioles. I did seminars around the country, and by 2010, it got pretty expensive to do that traveling, uh, all that traveling and promotion, and we decided let's take advantage of the internet and create an online training program. So that's where that came from, and it allows you to get to places that you can't get to when you're doing an in-person training program, like a seminar, because you're not going to go to Tucumcari, New Mexico, and or a little. I used to get letters all the time from people to say, "Hey, I'm up here in Saskatchewan. Can you come up here? We'll sponsor a seminar." Well, that's great. Who's going to come? There's
Right.
nobody around
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So, but the internet allows you to get everywhere around the world, and so that's very appealing to me to be able to. I get the biggest high out of teaching people how to do this craft. And I wish back when I got into it, I'd had that availability of information. But it's so cool today to see just how much is available to people out there now.
And it's something too, I feel like I never realized how much work is required, even down to a little league field. I thought it
Yeah,
was you throw some chalk down and you sweep off the bases and you're good to go.
and that's exactly how a lot of people handle it. If
Hmm.
you want
Wow.
something good, you've got to work at it. And
Right.
it's the little league. When I left Major League, back, I went backwards in my career. I started out as a Major League groundskeeper and I slid backwards into Little League.
Right.
Because when I left Major League Baseball and I came back here to where I grew up here in Madison, Wisconsin, my son was just getting old enough to play Little League Baseball. So we got involved there, Eric playing the games, and suddenly they're tapping me on the back and say, "Hey, we could really use your help here." And I go, "Yeah, I see that." So I kind of got sucked into it. And the first thing I told him is, "Well, first of all, you take care of this property, right? This is not a city park. You know, you're not bringing in enough money to take care of this place." Because I was shocked at how little the dues were for him to play. And so I had to convince these people what it took to do it.
So my last question, I've got a lawn. It doesn't have to look like Fenway, but if it could, is there any piece of advice you have for somebody who wants a nice lawn?
You living in the north or south?
Northeast.
When do you normally fertilize your lawn?
Okay, so I should be fertilizing my lawn?
Yeah, the dog peeing on it doesn't count.
For more information on Paul, you can follow him on Twitter, where he is at Paul Zwaska. For all of your field essentials and to learn even more about groundskeeping, you can check out Beacon Athletics. They are online at beaconathletics.com.
Be sure to follow Why the Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and check out our YouTube channel for some additional great Why content. If you're so inclined, please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing.
Today's show is produced by myself and Heidi Hedquist. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our graphic designer is Samantha Mustonen. Our intern is Randy Jeanette. The theme song was performed by the Electrosyntho-Magnetic Polyphonic Orchestra. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?